I used to think loneliness had a color, a sort of muted gray-green. The shade of the backroom walls at Petals and Prose after the sun slipped behind the buildings and the last customer had gone. It wasn't a dramatic loneliness. It didn't howl. It just settled on my shoulders every evening when I locked the door, the same way flour dust settled on my black apron, no matter how often I brushed it off. At 36, I had made peace with it. I had the shop. I had Mom's old recipes for rosewater syrup. I had the apartment on Maple Crust, where Dad's jazz records still spun on Sundays. I told myself that was enough. Then Marcus Reed walked in on a Tuesday in early March, snow melting off his coat in perfect circles on my hardwood floor, and the gray-green started to bleed away so fast it left me dizzy. He asked for something cheerful for his mother. I remember my hands moving on autopilot, wrapping sunflower stems in brown paper while I stole glances at him. 41, maybe 42, the kind of face that looks better with the faint silver at the temples. A voice like velvet dragged slowly over gravel. When he smiled, something in my chest actually fluttered, an honest-to-God flutter, like a teenager. I mocked myself for it later, but in that moment I let it happen. I let myself feel seen for the first time since the funeral. He came back 3 days later, then twice the next week. Always sunflowers, always cash, always that smile that felt aimed only at me. He asked about the photographs on the wall, Mom and Dad on their own wedding day, arms full of white peonies. He listened when I told him how the apartment still smelled faintly of Dad's aftershave on humid nights. He never rushed. He never looked at his watch. He simply stayed until closing, then asked if he could walk me home because the sidewalks were icy and he would never forgive himself if I slipped. I laughed at that line, out loud, in front of him. I hadn't laughed like that in 2 years. By the end of the month, he knew which flowers I secretly loved but never bought for myself. Black callas because they felt too dramatic for every day. He brought me a single stem on a Thursday, wrapped in newspaper, no note, just the flower and that look again. I pinned it in my hair like a fool and felt beautiful for the first time since I was a girl. He kissed me for the first time under the awning of the shop, rain drumming on the metal roof, city lights smearing across the wet street. I tasted coffee and something dangerous, and I didn't care. I wanted the danger. I wanted to be wanted. I wanted to believe that the hollow place inside me could still be filled. 2 months later, we stood in front of a judge who smelled faintly of peppermint and signed our names on a document that made us husband and wife. 11 witnesses, one courthouse hallway that echoed with my nervous laughter, and a bouquet of white anemones I had arranged at 4 a.m. because I couldn't sleep. When the judge said, "You may kiss the bride," Marcus cupped my face like I was something fragile and priceless and kissed me so gently the room tilted. People said it was fast. My assistant, Lena, raised an eyebrow and asked if I was sure. I was sure. For the first time in years, I was sure of something other than which fertilizer made orchids happiest. We started planning the move to the new condo. 2 bedrooms, south-facing windows, a balcony big enough for a table and 2 chairs. We called it the Fortress, half joking, because after so many years of keeping the world out, we were finally going to let someone in. Someone for each of us. I look back now, and I can pinpoint the exact moment the hook sunk deeper. The night he carried the last box of my books up the 3 flights to the apartment and set it down, sweating, hair curling at his temples, and said, "This is the beginning of everything, Nadia." I believed him. God help me. I believed every word. I tucked that moment away like a pressed flower between pages, not knowing the pages were already burning.
I still remember the weight of the emerald silk against my skin that night, the way it caught the light every time I turned my head, like I was someone else entirely. Marcus had chosen the dress himself, sent it over with a note that said only, "Wear this when you're ready to feel like the most important woman in the room." I laughed when I read it, but I wore it anyway. I wanted to feel that way. I wanted to believe I deserved to. The ivory lantern sat at the top of the oldest building downtown, windows looking out over the river like it owned the city. The maitre d' greeted Marcus by name, Mr. Reed, always a pleasure, and every head in the place turned, just slightly, the way people do when someone important walks in. I felt their eyes slide to me next, curious, measuring. For once, I didn't shrink. I let Marcus's hand rest at the small of my back and walked like the dress had been sewn onto me at birth. We were seated beneath a chandelier that probably cost more than my shop makes in a year. The champagne arrived before we even ordered. Marcus lifted his glass, eyes reflecting 1,000 tiny crystals. "To the first of many perfect evenings," he said. His voice was low enough that only I could hear the promise underneath. I drank. The bubbles felt like tiny fireworks going off inside my chest. He talked about the fortress again, how he'd already ordered a custom dining table that would seat 12 because he wanted me to fill the place with laughter and people who loved me. He talked about his mother, Evelyn, and how she couldn't wait to have a daughter at last. He talked about a trip to Tuscany he was planning for my 37th birthday, a house with lemon trees and a terrace where we'd drink wine and never set an alarm clock again. Every sentence landed like a soft kiss on the raw places I'd carried for 2 years. I soaked it up. I let myself get drunk on it long before the second bottle arrived. I noticed the small things, the way the waitstaff deferred to him, the way the manager himself came by twice to ask if everything was to Mr. Reed's satisfaction. Marcus accepted it the way other people accept oxygen. It should have been the first warning, that effortless command, but I mistook it for safety. Powerful men protect what's theirs, I told myself. That's what this is. He was in the middle of describing the exact shade of blue the Mediterranean turns at sunset when his phone vibrated against the tablecloth. Just once. His smile faltered for a half a heartbeat. Then he covered my hand with his. 2 minutes, he said. Apologetic, tender. Some people don't understand boundaries. He leaned in, brushed his lips against my temple, warm, familiar, intoxicating. And then he was gone, moving through the room like he belonged to it more than anyone else ever could. I sat there glowing in the candlelight, replaying every word he just fed me, turning them over like precious stones. I was so full of him, so sure of us, that I almost missed the moment the temperature changed in the room. Almost. The hook was already through my heart. I just hadn't felt it twist yet.
I was tracing the base of my champagne flute with one finger, watching the tiny bubbles race to the surface like they were trying to escape, when the woman at the next table leaned sideways so sharply her chair scraped the marble. I knew her before she even spoke. Eleanor Hayes, Daffodil Ellie. Every Tuesday for 3 years, she came in at 2:15 on the dot, ordered 24 yellow daffodils, always paid with exact change and a $5 bill folded into a perfect little heart that she tucked under the receipt spindle when she thought I wasn't looking. I kept every one of those hearts in a jar on the back shelf. She never missed a Tuesday. Not once. Tonight, she looked like a ghost of herself. Hair that was usually pinned neatly had come loose in gray wisps. Her eyes were wide, glassy, fixed on me with an intensity that made my stomach drop. She didn't speak at first. She simply reached across the narrow gap between our tables and pressed something thick and rubber-banded into my palm under the cover of the tablecloth. The roll was warm from her hand and heavy with cash. Her fingers closed over mine, hard enough to bruise. "Call a cab the second he comes back," she whispered, the words scraping out like they'd been locked in her throat for years. "Ladies' room window. Bars or no bars, find a way. My Claire didn't." Her grip tightened until her nails dug crescents into my skin.
He's a monster, Nadia. My daughter married him. She's gone. They never even found the body. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. My mind scrambled for sense. Wrong table, wrong woman, some terrible mistake. But her eyes were locked on mine, and there was no confusion in them, only a terror so pure it felt contagious. She released me as suddenly as she grabbed me, slid back into her seat, and stared down at her untouched tea as if nothing had happened. I sat frozen, the roll of hundreds burning a hole in my hand, my pulse roaring in my ears. Claire. I remembered Claire. 28, auburn curls, laugh like wind chimes. She used to come in with Eleanor sometimes, buy a single black calla lily for luck before job interviews. She vanished on a hiking trip 18 months ago. The story was in the papers for a week. Tragic accident, grieving fiancé, search called off. Marcus had worn a black armband for a month. He'd told me about it on our third date, voice rough with old grief, eyes distant. I had held his hand across a cafe table and promised him he'd never have to carry that kind of pain alone again. I looked down at the money in my lap and felt the floor tilt. Eleanor wouldn't meet my eyes now. She stirred her tea in perfect circles, spoon clinking softly against porcelain, the picture of an elegant old woman enjoying a quiet evening. Except her hand trembled so violently the tea sloshed over the rim. I glanced toward the lobby, where Marcus had disappeared. He was taking longer than 2 minutes. Every second stretched like taffy. I told myself she was confused. I told myself dementia, grief, mistaken identity. I told myself 100 comforting lies in the space of 1 heartbeat. But the roll of cash was real. The tremor in her wrist was real. And the way she had said my name, Nadia, like she'd been practicing it, like she'd been waiting for this exact night, was the most real thing I'd felt since the judge pronounced us married. Something cold and ancient uncoiled in my stomach. The hook twisted.
I didn't decide to run. My body decided for me. 1 heartbeat, I was still the woman in emerald silk smiling at the memory of Tuscany and lemon trees. The next heartbeat, the roll of cash was inside my clutch, my chair was on its back, and I was moving. Fast. I heard myself mutter, "Excuse me," to no one as I knocked a water glass flying. Crystal shattered like a gunshot. Heads turned. Someone gasped. I didn't stop. The corridor to the restrooms was dimly lit, carpet swallowing my heels. I slammed into the ladies' room, threw the bolt, and leaned my full weight against the door while my lungs tried to claw their way out of my chest. Silence on the other side. For now. I looked around wildly. Marble counters, gilded mirrors, a single frosted window set high. I kicked off the heels, hiked the silk dress to my thighs, and climbed onto the counter. The window was smaller than it had seemed from the floor, barely wide enough for shoulders, and iron bars stared back at me like teeth. I yanked anyway. Nothing moved. The bars were cemented deep. My phone shook so badly I dropped it twice on the marble before the rideshare app opened. Address, Petals, and Pros. Only place in the world that still felt like mine. Car coming. 4 minutes. White Toyota Camry. 4 minutes. I slid down, pressed my back to the door again, and listened. Footsteps. Slow, measured. Expensive shoes on thick carpet. A soft knock. Nadia? Marcus, voice honeyed with concern. Sweetheart, open the door. You're frightening people. I couldn't breathe. Another knock, gentler. Darling, whatever that woman said, she's confused. You know who I am. I did know, or I thought I did. I stared at the bolt. 1 twist and I could open it, fall into his arms, let him smooth my hair, and tell me it was all a mistake. I could go back to lemon trees and Tuscan sunsets and the fortress with south-facing windows. My hand lifted toward the bolt.
Then I heard Eleanor's voice again, raw and broken in my head. My Claire didn't. I dropped my hand. The knob rattled. Once. Twice. Nadia! Sharper now. Open this door. A second set of footsteps. Heavier. Mr. Reed, perhaps we should. I said I'll handle my wife. The key slid into the lock from the outside. I had seconds. I lunged for the fire alarm box on the wall, swung my clutch like a club. The glass cracked, but held. Again. Harder. Again. On the fourth swing, it shattered, and my knuckles split open on the jagged edge. I didn't feel the pain. I slammed the red button with the heel of my bleeding hand. The siren exploded through the building like the end of the world. The siren was a living thing, a wounded animal screaming through the pipes, ricocheting off marble and crystal until my eardrums throbbed. But it was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard, because it meant chaos, and chaos meant a chance. Smoke followed almost instantly. Real smoke, acrid and gray, curling in from the ventilation grates. Someone in the kitchen must have dropped a pan or a towel caught, or panic simply birthed fire. I didn't care. I welcomed it like an ally. The key scraped frantically in the lock outside. Once, twice, curses. Victor's voice rose in a panicked roar. "Open the damn door!" I pressed my back harder against the oak, silk dress soaked with sweat, blood from my knuckles smearing the white paint. The door shuddered as a shoulder slammed into it from the other side. Then, the sprinklers woke up. Cold water blasted from the ceiling in violent sheets, drenching me, plastering hair to my face, turning the marble floor into a skating rink. I tasted metal and fear. The door flew open. Victor filled the frame, tie askew, faced purple with rage. Behind him, Marcus, hair dripping, eyes black with something that wasn't love anymore. Victor lunged. I slipped sideways on the wet floor, grabbed the heavy porcelain trash lid from the counter, and swung it like a discus. It caught him across the temple with a sickening crack. He went down hard, knees first, blood mixing with sprinkler water into pink rivers. Marcus didn't even glance at him. He looked straight at me, water streaming down his perfect face, and for one heartbeat, the mask was completely gone. What stared out was pure, ice-cold predator. "Nadia," he said, almost gently. "Come here." I ran the other way. Out into the dining room turned war zone. Tables overturned, women clutching purses to their faces against the smoke, men shouting into phones, sprinklers raining like Judgment Day. The beautiful people of the city looked suddenly small and ridiculous, mascara running, tuxedos clinging, mouths open in animal panic. I saw Marcus behind me cutting through the crowd like a shark, eyes locked on me alone. I dove into the thickest knot of bodies, elbows and apologies and desperation. Someone grabbed my arm, Marcus, but I twisted free, nails raking flesh, and kept moving. The front doors were only 30 feet away, then 20, then 10. I burst out onto the grand staircase as the first fire truck sirens dopplered in the distance. Cold night air slapped my wet skin, shocking, glorious. I flew down the marble steps 2 at a time, barefoot, dress shredded to the thigh, blood and water trailing behind me like a comet's tail. I didn't look back. I ran until the ivory lantern was a glowing box behind me and the city swallowed me whole. Only then, in the mouth of a dark alley 2 blocks away, did I let myself collapse against brick, slide down until I sat in broken glass and rainwater, and finally let the first sob rip out of me. The hook was no longer twisting. It had torn straight through. The cab smelled of pine air freshener and old cigarettes, but it was warm, and it was moving, and the driver didn't ask questions. I sat in the back, dripping water and blood onto the cracked vinyl seat, clutching my ruined clutch like a life raft. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger. Mascara rivers, hair plastered to my cheeks, emerald silk clinging like wet paper. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Petals and Prose appeared on the corner like a small miracle. The familiar green awning, the window boxes I'd planted with pansies last week, the gold lettering that still read Nadia Coleman Proprietor in Mom's favorite font. I paid the driver with Eleanor's soaked hundreds and stumbled out barefoot onto the sidewalk. My hands remembered the keys even when my mind didn't. The lock turned with the soft, familiar click I'd heard 10,000 times. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me, and threw every deadbolt, 4 of them, then the chain, then the floor bolt I'd installed after a break-in 3 years ago. The shop smelled of damp earth and eucalyptus and safety. I left the lights off. Only the back room lamp, the one with the fringed shade Mom had bought in Marrakesh, cast a weak amber pool across the velvet sofa. I sank into it and let the silence wrap around me like a blanket. For 10 minutes, I just breathed. In, out. The scent of home, the faint hum of the cooler, the tick of the old wall clock Dad had salvaged from a demolished theater. I was alive. I was inside my fortress. Nothing could touch me here. Then I opened the battered work laptop on the coffee table. The screen glowed cold and blue. I logged into my bank, fingers still trembling so badly I had to type the password 3 times. Balance, $127,413.62. Every penny I'd saved since I was 16, every overtime hour, every skipped vacation, every birthday check from Aunt Ruth, my entire life in numerals. I opened the transfer tab, entered the card number of an old payroll debit I hadn't touched in years, typed the amount, all of it, and hit send. The little wheel spun. Spun. Then a red banner slid across the screen like a guillotine. Transaction denied. Accounts have been temporarily frozen due to suspected fraudulent activity. Action initiated by joint owner Marcus Reed. I stared at those words until they stopped making sense, until they rearranged themselves into a scream inside my skull. He had done this while I was still smiling at him across white linen, while I was still tasting champagne and forever on my tongue. While he was kissing my temple and promising me Tuscany, he was already locking the cage. I tried again. Same red banner. Again. Each denial felt like another tooth pulled. I closed the laptop and looked around the back room that had been my refuge since I was a child hiding from thunderstorms. The sofa where Mom used to nap between deliveries, the tiny fridge where Dad kept root beer for the days we worked late, the shelf of folded $5 hearts from Eleanor. None of it was mine anymore. Not really. Marcus knew I would come here. He knew this was the first place I would run. The shop wasn't a sanctuary. It was a trap with petals. I stood up slowly, legs numb, and started filling a backpack with whatever mattered. Laptop, external drive, the jar of Eleanor's paper hearts, 1 change of clothes, the remaining cash. My hands remembered the keys, even when my mind didn't. There was only one place left in the entire world that still belonged to me alone. Mom and Dad's apartment on Maple Crest. I slung the backpack over my shoulder, turned off the lamp, and walked out into the cold without looking back. The hook wasn't just torn through me now. It was dragging me under.
The second cab ride was silent except for the driver's radio murmuring late-night jazz. I sat in the dark, backpack on my lap, barefoot and bleeding, the city sliding past like a film I no longer belonged to. Maple Crest. 3rd floor, apartment 27. Mom's wind chimes still hung by the door. I could almost hear them before we even turned onto the block. I paid, stepped out, and the cold bit my wet skin. The maple tree in the courtyard had dropped its last leaves. They lay bruised and wet across the path I used to run as a child. I took the stairs 2 at a time, key already in my hand, heart hammering with something dangerously close to hope. The key went in, turned halfway, then stopped. I pulled it out, tried again. Same resistance. Something hard and deliberate blocked the cylinder. I moved to the lower lock. Same story. My fingers started to shake so violently the key ring slipped from my hand and clattered down the stairwell like a gunshot. I froze. From inside came the soft shuffle of slippers on hardwood. My hardwood. I pounded. Open up! Police! Open this door! The door opened slowly. A woman in her mid-50s stood there in a faded housecoat, hair in plastic curlers, cigarette dangling from her lip. She looked me up and down like I was a Jehovah's Witness at 2 a.m. "Who the hell are you?" she snapped. "This is my apartment. I live here." She laughed, a short bark. "I pay rent to a Mrs. Evelyn Reed. Been here 3 weeks. Take it up with management, lady." Behind her, I saw Mom's couch buried under laundry baskets, Dad's jazz records stacked like coasters. The framed photo of my parents on their wedding day turned face down on the side table. I couldn't breathe. Footsteps on the stairs. Measured. Familiar. Marcus appeared first. Coat unbuttoned, hair still damp from the sprinklers, face arranged into perfect husbandly concern. Evelyn Reed followed, elegant even at this hour, pearls glowing against navy wool. "Nadia, sweetheart," Marcus said, softly, loud enough for the neighbors, now peeking from cracked doors. "We've been worried sick." Evelyn stepped forward, took my elbow with grandmotherly tenderness. "She's had a difficult evening. We'll take her home." I tried to pull away. "This is my home." Marcus sighed, the sound of a patient man forced to explain the obvious. He produced a leather folder, opened it with deliberate calm. He told the growing audience of bathrobes and curious eyes, temporary protective transfer of title. Nadia's been struggling financially. To prevent foreclosure, we moved the deed into Mother's name. All perfectly legal. He turned the document so everyone could see the last page. My signature. Clear, looping, unmistakable. 2 nights ago. Movie on the television, his arm around me, a stack of papers slid across my lap. Just some boring post-wearing forms, love. Sign here, here, and here, so I can handle everything. I had scrawled my name without reading a single line. The neighbors' faces shifted. Mrs. Alvarez from 4C, who used to bring me tamales every Christmas, now looked at me with pity and suspicion. Old Mr. Jensen from the 5th floor shook his head like I was a disgrace. I opened my mouth to scream the truth, but the words tangled in my throat. Evelyn's grip tightened, nails digging in through my wet sleeve. "Come along, dear. You're exhausted." Marcus closed the folder gently. "Let's not make a scene, darling." I looked at the stranger in my doorway, at my parents' furniture under someone else's laundry, at my own signature selling my life away. And I understood. The hook wasn't dragging me under anymore. It had already pulled me all the way to the bottom. I tore my arm from Evelyn's grip so violently her pearl bracelet snapped, pearls scattering across the landing like tiny white accusations. "This is my home," I screamed, voice raw and splintering. "That woman is living in my parents' apartment. I never sold anything." The hallway filled. Doors creaked wider. Phones appeared. Someone started recording. Marcus lifted both hands in a calming gesture, the picture of a reasonable man dealing with an unreasonable wife. Nadia, sweetheart, you've been under enormous stress. We talked about this. The creditors. What creditors? I have no debts. You stole my home with a signature I didn't know I was giving. Mrs. Alvarez crossed herself. Mr. Jensen muttered something about poor thing and mental health. The woman in the housecoat leaned in her doorway, arms folded, smirking around her cigarette. Evelyn stepped forward, voice soft, lethal, perfectly pitched for every open door and every phone camera. We only want to help her. She's been confused since the wedding, took money from the joint account, disappeared for hours. We were afraid she might harm herself. The word harm rippled through the hallway like poison gas. I lunged at Marcus, fist clenched, ready to claw the mask off his face in front of everyone. He caught my wrists easily, held them between us like he was restraining a child. See, he said sadly to the neighbors, she's not herself. I spat every word I had. You locked me in a bathroom. You froze my money. You put a stranger in my home. You murdered Eleanor's daughter. Gasps. Phones lifted higher. Evelyn's eyes flicked with something icy and triumphant. That poor woman. Forgive the dramatics. Grief does strange things. The poor woman who accosted her at dinner lost a child years ago. Nadia's been impressionable. I saw it then, the way the story was already rewriting itself in their minds. Hysterical bride, grieving old woman, worried husband, saintly mother-in-law. Every truth I screamed would only sound crazier against their calm, expensive voices. Marcus loosened his grip just enough to slide an arm around my shoulders, a loving embrace to everyone watching. His mouth brushed my ear. "Keep fighting, darling," he whispered, so low only I heard the venom. I felt the hallway tilt. The walls pressed in. The phones kept recording. I did the only thing left. I ran. Down the stairs, 3 flights, bare feet slapping cold concrete, pearls crunching under me like broken teeth. Behind me, Marcus called my name in that perfect worried husband voice. But he didn't chase hard. He didn't need to. The damage was done. I hit the courtyard running, past the maple tree that used to hold my childhood swing, past the mailboxes where Mom taught me to read my first address. The night swallowed me. I ran until my lungs were knives and my legs gave out in an alley 3 miles away. I slid down graffiti-covered wall and sat in puddles and garbage, soaked silk dress riding high, blood and tears mixing on my face. I had no money that wasn't frozen, no home that wasn't occupied by a stranger, no name that hadn't just been dragged through the mud in front of people who once brought me Christmas tamales. I was homeless, penniless, painted as a thief and a lunatic before breakfast. And somewhere in the city, Marcus and Evelyn were probably pouring nightcaps, satisfied that phase 1 was complete. I hugged my knees to my chest and rocked in the dark, the last shred of the woman who'd worn emerald silk dissolving into the rain. The hook wasn't in me anymore. I was the bait now, drowning on the end of their line.
I don't know how long I sat in that alley. Long enough for the rain to stop and the city to go quiet except for sirens far away. Long enough for the cold to sink into my bones and numb the parts that still wanted to scream. Eventually, I stood up, barefoot, ruined, and walked until I found a cheap hostel that asked no questions when I slid Eleanor's wet hundreds across the counter. The clerk gave me a key to a room that smelled of mildew and old despair. I locked the door, sat on the sagging bed, and stared at the only name in my phone that might still mean something. Eleanor Hayes. My thumb hovered over the call button for a full minute. What if she'd been drunk, confused? What if I'd just destroyed my life over a hallucination? Then I remembered her eyes in the restaurant, eyes that had seen her daughter lowered into the ground, or worse, never found at all. I pressed call. 4 rings. 5. I was ready to hang up when a trembling voice answered. Hello? It's Nadia, from the shop, from the restaurant. Silence. Then a sound like a sob swallowed whole. You're alive. Oh, thank God. Where are you? I told her the hostel's name, the room number, voice cracking on every syllable. Stay there, she said, suddenly fierce. Lock the door. I'm coming. 43 minutes later, there was a soft knock. I opened the door with the chain still on. Eleanor stood in the hallway in a navy raincoat, gray hair loose, face stripped of every pretense of calm. She looked 20 years older than the woman who bought daffodils on Tuesdays. She stepped inside, closed the door, and without a word pulled me into her arms. She smelled of chamomile and grief and something unbreakable. I shattered. I cried into her shoulder until there was nothing left, until my legs gave out and she lowered us both to the thin carpet. She held me like a mother, rocking slightly, murmuring the same words over and over. You're safe now. You're safe. When the storm passed, she helped me to my feet, looked around the miserable room with quiet fury, and said, You're not staying here. Come home with me. Her apartment was small, warm, immaculate. Books stacked everywhere, a kettle already whistling on the stove, and photographs, dozens of them. The same girl in every frame, auburn curls, huge smile, arms full of yellow daffodils. Claire. Eleanor poured tea into 2 delicate cups that shook in her hands. Same story, she said, flat and terrible. Met Marcus at a charity auction, whirlwind, married in 4 months, signed everything over for their future dream house. Hiking trip in the mountains, she fell. Search called off after 5 days, body never recovered. 3 weeks later, the apartment belonged to him, sold before the funeral flowers wilted. I stared at Claire's laughing face on the wall and felt the last piece click into place. Evelyn Reed ran the city's housing department. She had access to every deed, every notary, every stamp that made a lie look like truth. Marcus was the charming bait. Claire had been number 6. I was number 8. Eleanor met my eyes across the table. There's a ledger, gray cover, hidden in Evelyn's office. Every name, every property, every accident. My friend's sister cleans nights. She's seen it. The rage that rose in me then wasn't hot. It was cold, clean, surgical. I set my teacup down without a tremor. Tell me how we get in. The hook was gone. In its place was a blade. Eleanor's kitchen was lit only by a single lamp over the stove, the kind of low amber light that makes secrets feel safer to speak aloud. We sat across from each other,
Two women who had been bled dry by the same lie. Steam curling from untouched chamomile like ghosts refusing to leave. She spoke slowly, as if every word cost her another year of life. After Claire, after they told me she fell, I stopped sleeping. I started watching. I learned things. There were others before her. Always women alone. Always with something to inherit. An apartment, a house, a paid-off condo. Marcus finds them, loves them, marries them fast, then an accident. Always an accident no one can prove wasn't. She traced the rim of her cup with one trembling finger. Evelyn Reed sits at the top of the housing department like a spider. She controls the registries, the notaries on payroll, the archivists who can backdate anything. One signature from a woman in love, and suddenly the deed was never yours to begin with. By the time anyone questions it, the woman is gone and the paperwork is perfect. I felt the cold spread from my stomach into my fingertips. How many? I asked. 7 that I found. Claire was 6. You're 8. 7 ghosts sitting in this kitchen with us. Eleanor leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper that still managed to fill the room. There's a ledger, physical, gray leather, no title. She keeps it in her office, not on any computer. My friend Marisol, her sister Rosa, cleans the building nights. Rosa swears she's seen it. Evelyn opens the safe behind a framed award, takes out the book, makes a mark, closes it again. Rosa says the woman smiles when she does it, like she's checking items off a shopping list. I closed my eyes and saw it. Evelyn Reed in pearl earrings, pen poised, writing my name next to the word "in progress." My name on a death list. I opened my eyes again. We have to get that book. Eleanor's gaze sharpened. We can't buy it, borrow it, or beg for it. We have to take it. Breaking into a government building? Rosa can get us in after midnight. Service entrance. Cameras loop every 23 minutes on the 3rd floor. She knows the blind spots. I laughed then. A short, cracked sound that surprised us both. 2 weeks ago, I was picking out china patterns. Now I'm planning a felony with a woman whose daughter was murdered by my husband. Eleanor reached across the table and closed her cold hand over mine. Not planning, she corrected softly. Ending. The lamp flickered once, as if the building itself agreed. Outside, the city kept breathing, oblivious. Inside, something forged between us in that small circle of light. Not friendship, not yet. Something harder. A pact written in shared graves. I looked at Claire's photograph on the wall. Auburn curls, daffodils, the smile that would never grow older. Tomorrow night, I thought. Tomorrow night, we walk into the spider's parlor and cut the web at its heart. I was no longer the woman who believed in lemon trees and Tuscan sunsets. I was the 8th name on a list that would never be finished. The blade was in my hand now, and I knew exactly where to cut.
Morning came in gray slices through Eleanor's curtains. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my own looping signature selling my life away, or Claire's laughing photograph, or Evelyn Reed smiling while she wrote "in progress" next to my name. When the light turned the color of weak tea, I borrowed Eleanor's old coat, navy wool, too big, smelling faintly of daffodils and grape, and slipped out. I had one stop to make before we walked into the spider's parlor. Lena worked the early shift on Saturdays. I knew she'd be at the park behind the market walking her ancient beagle before opening the shop. I kept it to the shadows of the sycamores, hood up, hands buried in the coat pockets like a fugitive, which I realized with a sick jolt I now was. She saw me before I reached her. Her face went white. Nadia? A whisper, as if saying my name too loud might summon men in leather jackets. Jesus, what happened to you? I didn't waste time. I need you to listen and not ask questions I can't answer yet. Marcus and his mother took everything. Apartment, money, my name. They've done it before.
People are dead, Lena. I'm next. Her mouth opened, closed. The beagle sat and looked up at us with liquid eyes. I know you think I've lost my mind, I pressed on, voice low and shaking. But in 24 hours, I'll either have proof or I'll be gone like the others. I need one thing from you. She swallowed hard. Anything. Your cousin Rosa cleans the housing department, right? Third shift? Lena nodded slowly. Tonight, Eleanor and I are going in. We need a key to Evelyn Reed's office. Her eyes widened until I saw white all around the irises. Nadia, that's insane. There are cameras, security. Rosa knows the blind spots. Please. She stared at me for a long moment, then reached into her pocket. When her hand came out, a single brass key lay in her palm like a bullet. Rosa made a copy last year when Evelyn lost hers. She never told anyone, said she didn't trust the woman. She pressed the key into my hand and folded my fingers over it. If you get caught, I won't let them trace it to you. We both knew that was a lie, but she let me have it. I started to turn away. She caught my sleeve. There's something else. Her voice dropped to barely a breath. This morning, Evelyn held a press conference in front of the shop, said she's launching a program to help women entrepreneurs, used Petals and Prose as the backdrop. Peter fired you on camera, called you unstable, said you'd been stealing. It's already online. The last piece of my old life, the shop I'd built from 17-year-old hands and sleepless nights, weaponized against me before breakfast. I closed my fist around the key until the teeth bit my palm. Let them talk, I said. By tomorrow night, the only story will be the truth. Lena's eyes filled. She hugged me hard, beagles circling our ankles, and then I walked away before either of us could change our minds. The key was cold and heavy, a small metal promise. Tonight, it would open the door to every grave they thought they'd buried. The blade was sharpened now. I was ready to cut.
We moved through the city like two shadows stitched together by rage. 11:58 p.m. The housing department building loomed over the empty square, a brutal slab of 1950s concrete lit only by security floods that left long, black wounds between the light. Eleanor wore black slacks and a dark sweater. I wore the same borrowed coat, hood up, backpack with the phone, and a small flashlight zipped tight against my spine. Rosa had wedged this service door with a sliver of wood hours earlier. It opened for us without a sound. Inside smelled of bleach and old paper. The corridor stretched forever, lit by sickly fluorescent strips that buzzed like dying insects. Rosa had given us a hand-drawn map on the back of a cleaning schedule. 3rd floor, west wing, avoid the motion sensor at the stairwell. Stay left of the red line painted on the floor. We followed it like scripture. Our footsteps were nothing. 2 women who had already lost everything make no noise. 3rd floor, Deputy Director Evelyn Reed. The brass plate gleamed even in the dark, as if it knew it was untouchable. My hand didn't shake when I slid Lena's key in. The lock turned with a soft, obedient click. We slipped inside and closed the door behind us. The office was perfect. Not clean, perfect. Polished desk like a black mirror. Pencils sharpened to surgical points, not a paper out of place. The city's spider sat at the center of a web so flawless it looked innocent. Eleanor took the bookcases. I went straight to the wall of awards. One photograph hung a millimeter crooked. In a room this precise, it was a scream. I lifted the frame. A small safe stared back, round combination dial gleaming. Eleanor whispered, "We'll never guess it." I didn't need to guess. People like Evelyn never choose random numbers. They choose the year they first tasted power. I spun slowly. 1, 9, 5, 8. A dull clunk inside the wall. The safe opened like it had been waiting for me. One object lay on the single shelf, a slim, gray ledger, leather cover, no title.
I pulled it out with both hands as if it might bite. Eleanor's breath caught when I opened it under the flashlight's thin beam. Neat columns, 8 rows. Name, address, acquired via, status, notes. 1. Margaret Ellison, 214 W 14th. Marriage, complete. Overdose, ruled accidental. 2. Ruth Park, 89 Cedar Lane, partnership, complete. Car into river. 6. Claire Hayes, 112B Harbor View, marriage, complete. Fall, body not recovered. 8. Nadia Coleman, 27 Maple Crest, marriage, in progress. My own name, written by Evelyn's elegant, poisonous script. Beside each entry, a tiny glued-in photocopy of the fraudulent deed, stamped, notarized, perfect. I laid the ledger on the desk and started photographing, page by page, flash off, phone trembling only once when Eleanor stood guard at the door, one hand pressed to her mouth, tears sliding silently down her cheeks when Claire's line came into view. We were on page 14 when the air changed. Footsteps in the corridor. Not the soft shuffle of cleaners, confident, male, coming straight for us. The blade was out now, and it was about to taste blood.
The footsteps stopped right outside the door. I had time for one more photograph, page 15, the final glue-in deed with my forged signature, before the key scraped in the lock. I slammed the ledger shut, shoved it back into the safe, spun the dial, and hung the crooked frame with shaking fingers. Eleanor grabbed the heavy crystal paperweight from the desk like it was a grenade. We pressed ourselves flat against the wall on either side of the door. It opened fast. Marcus stepped in first, black turtleneck, black jeans, no trace of the charming husband. Behind him, Lena, face streaked with tears, mascara running, hands twisted together in guilt and terror. Marcus's eyes found the open safe in the same heartbeat. The mask was gone. What looked back at us was pure animal. "You two old women ruined everything." He lunged, not at Eleanor, at me. I was the one holding the phone with every page of the ledger burning inside it. I tried to twist away, but he was faster. His hand clamped around my wrist, twisted until bones ground. The phone flew, skittered across the carpet. His other hand buried itself in my hair, yanked my head back so hard my spine screamed. "You should have stayed in the alley and cried," he whispered against my ear, breath hot and sour. "It would have been kinder." Then the world exploded. Eleanor swung the crystal paperweight with both hands like a hammer of God. It caught Marcus across the temple with a wet, sickening crunch. His eyes rolled white, his grip loosened. He dropped straight down, knees first, then face, blood already pooling beneath his cheek. The paperweight slipped from Eleanor's fingers and shattered on the marble. Silence roared, louder than any siren. Lena sobbed from the doorway. "They have my kid's school photos. They said if I didn't bring him—" Marcus groaned on the floor, fingers twitching. Eleanor grabbed my arm. "Run." We ran, out the door, past Lena's crumpled form, down the corridor that suddenly felt a mile long. Behind us, Marcus roared, half pain, half fury, and heavy feet started pounding. Alarms didn't matter anymore. We flew down the emergency stairs, 3 flights, 4, shoes slipping on polished concrete. The service corridor stretched ahead like a tunnel to another life. "Left," Eleanor gasped, remembering Rosa's map. We rounded the corner at full speed and slammed into a dead end. A heavy glass door, chained shut for the night. Trapped. Marcus's footsteps thundered closer, joined now by others, security, maybe more. Alarms echoed. "Third floor, block the exits." Eleanor's eyes met mine in the half-dark. No fear left in them, only fire. She shoved me sideways, hard, into a narrow janitor's closet barely wider than a coffin. Mops and buckets clattered. "What are you—" She pushed me deeper.
then stepped in after me, back to the door, blocking me with her body. "I'm buying you time," she whispered, voice steady as stone. "No!" She slammed the door from the inside, twisted the old rusty deadbolt with fingers that never shook. Through the tiny, grimy window, I saw her turn to face the corridor, small and frail and unbreakable. Marcus rounded the corner, blood streaming down his face, rage twisting him into something demonic. Eleanor lifted her chin. "Come and get me, you bastard," she said loud enough for me to hear through the door. Then the guards were on her. I screamed her name until my throat bled, but the lock held. The last thing I saw before they dragged her away was her looking back over her shoulder, straight at me, and giving the smallest, most fierce nod I'd ever seen. The blade was in her hand, now, and she had just cut me free.
I beat on the closet door until my fists were raw, until the metal handle cut half moons into my palms, until my voice gave out and became nothing but a rag and hiss. "Eleanor! Eleanor, open the door!" Outside, the corridor filled with grunts and shouts. I pressed my eye to the grimy window and watched them drag her away. She didn't fight. She walked between the two guards like a queen, shoulders straight, chin high, blood from Marcus's head still wet on her sleeve. When they shoved her toward the elevators, she turned her head once more and looked straight at the closet. Our eyes locked through the glass. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply mouthed 3 words I felt more than I heard. "Noon. Civic Auditorium." Then she was gone. The door stayed locked from the outside now. Someone had turned the deadbolt the other way. I was sealed inside a coffin of mops and bleach, the only light a thin gray blade from the high ventilation slit. The smell of chemicals clawed at my throat. My phone, miraculously unbroken, showed 1:47 a.m. and 9% battery. I slid down the wall, knees to chest, and let the dark have me. Hours passed, or minutes. Time had lost its edges. I kept seeing Eleanor's face through the glass, the nod that said, "This is how we finish it." I kept hearing Marcus groaning on the carpet, blood spreading like spilled ink. I kept feeling the moment the crystal paperweight connected and the world changed forever. At some point, I started shaking. Not from cold, from the realization that Eleanor had just traded her life for mine. She had locked me in here knowing they would take her instead. She had looked at 71 years old, frail bones and all, and decided the story ended with her in handcuffs so I could walk free with the truth burning in my pocket. I pressed my forehead to the cold metal door and whispered the only promise I had left. "I won't waste it." Dawn finally bled through the slit, turning the closet the color of weak coffee. Cleaners arrived around 7. Voices echoing, buckets clanging. One of them rattled my handle, muttered something about the lock always sticking, and moved on. I waited until the building filled with the shuffle of civil servants, the ringing of phones, the ordinary hum of a Monday no one knew was about to burn. Then I knocked. Softly at first, then harder. "Hello? Somebody? I'm locked in here." Keys jangled. The deadbolt turned. A woman in a blue uniform opened the door and stepped back in shock when she saw me, wild-eyed, bruised, covered in blood and bleach. "Ma'am, how did you—" "Got stuck last night," I croaked, pushing past her before she could finish the sentence. "Long story." I walked straight down the corridor, head high, backpack slung over one shoulder like I belonged. No one stopped me. In the morning rush, I was just another exhausted employee who'd pulled an all-nighter. I made it to the service exit, stepped into blinding daylight, and disappeared into the city before the first alarm about a break-in even sounded. I had 11 hours. 11 hours to print every photographed page of the gray ledger in glaring, undeniable color. 11 hours to call every relative of every dead woman I could reach.
11 hours to walk into the Civic Auditorium at noon and finish what Eleanor had started with a crystal paperweight and a mother's unbreakable love. I pulled the hood up, wiped Marcus's blood from my sleeve, and started moving. The blade was back in my hand. And this time, the whole city was going to feel the cut. And she had just cut me free.
11:57 a.m. I walked into the Civic Auditorium looking like the dead had sent me back with a message. Hair wild, emerald silk now gray with grime and blood, face bruised where Marcus had twisted my wrist. The backpack with 5 thick folders of printed ledger pages hung heavy against my spine. My phone, 6% battery, burned in my pocket like a live grenade. Inside the hall was a sea of red velvet seats and polite applause. A string quartet played something triumphant. City officials in suits smiled for cameras. At the center of the raised dais sat Evelyn Reed in flawless cream silk, pearls glowing, receiving the Community Pillar Award from the mayor himself. Marcus stood at his side, head bandaged, face composed into heroic suffering, the grieving son who had been attacked by a madwoman. They hadn't expected me to make it this far. I started down the center aisle. People turned. Whispers rippled outward like circles in water. Security moved to intercept. Then a man in the front row stood up. He was in his 50s, grease still under his nails, holding a framed photograph of a smiling older woman. "Let her speak," he said, voice rough but steady. "That ledger has my mother's name on it, too." Another voice from the third row, a woman this time, clutching a portrait of a young bride. "And my sister." Then another, and another. By the time I reached the steps to the stage, half the front section was standing, photographs raised like battle standards. The quartet faltered and died. Cameras swung toward the commotion. Security froze, unsure whose orders to follow. I climbed the 3 steps slowly. The mayor's smile wavered. Evelyn's face turned to marble. Marcus took 1 step toward me, murder in his eyes. I didn't look at him. I walked straight to the podium, took the microphone from the stunned MC, and turned to the hall. My voice, when it came, was hoarse, cracked, but it filled every corner of the auditorium. My name is Nadia Coleman. 2 weeks ago, I married that man. I pointed at Marcus without looking. Yesterday, he and his mother stole my home, my money, and tried to steal my life. They've done it before. 7 times. Gasps. Cameras flashed like lightning. I opened the first folder, held up the printed pages so the front rows could see the neat columns, the names, the dates, the words complete, accident. Number 1, Margaret Ellison, overdose, apartment sold 3 weeks later. Number 3, Ruth Park, car into river. Number 6, Claire Hayes, fall from a cliff, body never found. From the back doors came a crash. Eleanor's nephew and 5 others pushed through, carrying an enormous framed portrait of Claire. Auburn curls, daffodils, that radiant smile. They held it high above the crowd. A collective cry went up. Someone sobbed openly. I kept reading, voice growing stronger with every name. Number 8, Nadia Coleman, status, in progress. I turned the page so the cameras could zoom in on my own name written in Evelyn's perfect handwriting. The hall detonated. People were on their feet everywhere now, shouting names, holding up photographs, pointing at the stage. Reporters shoved toward the front. The mayor went white, realizing the award he was about to pin on Evelyn was now a noose. Evelyn finally moved. She stood, magnificent in her rage, and screamed over the chaos, "This is slander! I will sue every one of you!" Marcus tried to reach me. 2 uniformed officers intercepted him before he made it 3 steps. I looked straight at Evelyn and spoke the last line into the microphone. "Your ledger is in every newspaper in the state by now. It's over." Then I stepped back and let the police take the stage. The blade had cut clean.
And the spider was finally caught in her own web. And she had just cut me free. They took Evelyn first. 2 officers moved in from the wings like they'd been waiting for permission the entire ceremony. She rose to her full height, pearls flashing, chin imperial, and actually tried to wave them off with the same hand that had written "In Progress" beside my name. "Do you know who I am? This is assault on a city official." The taller officer simply took her elbow, turned her, and snapped the cuffs on with a soft metallic click that echoed through the stunned hall like a judge's gavel. The mayor dropped the award plaque. It hit the stage and shattered. Marcus fought harder. He snarled, twisted, tried to bolt toward the side exit. 3 officers brought him down in the aisle, face first into the red carpet. His bandage came loose, fresh blood streaked the floor. Someone in the crowd started clapping. Slow, deliberate, spreading until the entire auditorium thundered with it. I stood at the podium and watched them drag my husband away in handcuffs while cameras flashed like a storm. I felt nothing. Not triumph, not relief, just a vast, hollow quiet where fear used to live. They released Eleanor that same afternoon. All charges dropped. The assault on Marcus suddenly became self-defense and defense of another the moment the ledger hit the newsrooms. I met her outside the precinct with the biggest bunch of yellow daffodils I could carry. She took one look at them, burst into tears, and laughed at the same time. We didn't speak until we were in the cab. She said, "You kept your promise," voice raw. So did I. A week later, the city voided every fraudulent transfer. The apartment on Maple Crest was mine, again, deed returned, locks changed, stranger evicted with her onion-smelling laundry. I walked in alone at dusk. The room still carried the ghost of someone else's life, cigarette haze, cheap air freshener, a stranger's dishes in the sink. But underneath it all was Mom's lavender wallpaper and Dad's jazz records, waiting exactly where I'd left them. I opened every window. October wind rushed in, cold and clean. I turned Billie Holiday up until the walls shook. Then I went to the shop. Peter had called, voice trembling, begging me to come back, offering raises, apologies, anything. I filled a van with white tulips, lisianthus, eucalyptus, and baby's breath, and I worked until my fingers bled again, but this time from thorns, not terror. I filled every room until the smell of strangers was gone, until the apartment smelled only of earth and forgiveness and things growing again. Eleanor came the next morning carrying a single bunch of daffodils wrapped in brown paper, no rubber band, no apology note. Just flowers for herself for the first time in 3 years. We sat on the balcony drinking tea while the city moved below us, indifferent and alive. She told me Claire used to say daffodils were brave, first to push through frozen ground, first to promise spring. I told her I was keeping the gray ledger in a safety deposit box, not as a trophy, but as insurance. Some monsters grow new legs if you don't keep the evidence caged. We didn't cry anymore. We were past that. Sometimes, late at night, I still wake reaching for a husband who never existed. Sometimes I still taste sprinkler water and blood. Sometimes I still hear the click of handcuffs on manicured wrists. But then I smelled tulips on the nightstand. I hear Eleanor's laugh from the next room when she comes for coffee. I see the jar on the shelf filling again with $5 hearts from customers who never knew how close the shop came to dying. I am Nadia Coleman again. I am the woman who walked onto a stage in a ruined emerald dress and cut a spider down with nothing but 20 pages of truth and a mother's unbreakable love. And every spring, when the daffodils come up first, brave and golden and loud, I smile. Because some stories end with monsters in cages, And some of us get to come home and plant new ones.